Hello people, today we're going to talk about selectors. Most of the time in the context of the test automation, you will be following the pattern of navigating to some page, you find some elements, you click or type or send keys into them, you assert that something happened, and you repeat and repeat and repeat. But to interact with an element, you need to find it first. And there are multiple ways of doing that in Cypress. The one which comes default is CSS selectors. You could also enable XPath support via the plugin, but we're going to talk about it in the next video. And you could use cypress-testing-library to get even cleaner and easier selectors. So today, I'm going to start with CSS selectors. We're going to look at the little demo that I have set up and learn about the basic selectors. Let's go. In order to do today's demo, I've created a simple single-page React app to show you all the CSS selector stuff I want to show you. I'm not going to demo how I did it, but essentially I just installed the npm package create react app, and then I followed these instructions. I'm going to leave a description and a link to that page in the description for this video, so you could follow along if you wish to. So let's find some elements. I'm gonna start with the most basic and probably useless pattern, which is a universal selector. By the way, what I'm using is Firefox here. It works exactly the same in Chrome. If you open the inspector with the source code of your web app, you can do the Control F and you're gonna be able to search HTML via the selector. So let's try the universal one and see what it gives us. You see, it just gives us high level. It basically gives us everything, which is not very useful. So I'm gonna close that and we're gonna go and look at the selecting element by its type. So for example, I could find all the divs. If you go, you can see we have one of two. If I go to the next one, you see I found both of the divs. The next one is selecting by the element's ID. So it works as a prefix as a hash. So I can say find me hash root. So that's only one. Next one is selecting by class. So to select by a class, you need to do the dot. You can see the browser is actually smart enough to suggest me all the classes that my app has. So if I say give me all elements that have class app, that's it. Now let's talk about the more complex ones, when you have to combine selectors in order to get the one which, for example, doesn't have a class or something like that. So I'll start with the child selector. So how it works is you do the selector and then you say child, and then you have a choice of which of the two child it is. So child is the element which lives one level underneath. It's like a direct child of that element. You could also choose a pattern which called a descendant. So descendant is any element that lives under this tree. So not only the direct child, but child of the child of the child of the child, and so on recursively until you exhausted all the elements. So for example, I can say give me all the divs. No, it's actually give me all the h1s which are descendant of a div, and you can get that element. Another selector which is probably not very helpful in the context of test automation, but actually helpful when you doing the CSS itself, is a comma separation. Comma separation means literally or. So for what is going on with my browser? So you could say give me h1 or h2. I don't know, my browser doesn't want to collaborate. How about that? Okay, it works. So you can get this or that. So probably unlikely you're gonna need that when you're writing test automation. One more group of helpful selectors called attribute selectors, and I'm gonna demo some of them to you right now. So the syntax for them is a square brackets, and then you can say attribute and the value. So for example, you can say, give me all elements that have target blank, and it gives you this element. We already used that in an example of, if you haven't watched the previous video, the link will appear here or here. So go have a look. We already used that kind of a selector in our first demo video. So the next one is you could just select by the attribute. So for example, you could say, give me all elements which have target, and I have 2 in this case. There are also modifiers that you could apply that's gonna allow you to search by the value. So the useful ones are wildcard. So you can say, give me all the elements which have, let's say, a letter L inside of the value of the target attribute. You can see we have 2, but if I do LA, I have only 1 because the blank only have LA, but this one doesn't. There's another one which is the beginning of the selector, beginning of the value. Think regexp, the cap and the $signs are exactly what used in regexp. So here you can say, give me all of them that starts with _B and or _S, and you're gonna get it. You could also say, give me all the one that ends with K. So we get that. So what do you do when nothing else works? So I showed you a bunch of ways of select elements, but there are times where you cannot just select it, and there's no way around it. Like even if you master of CSS selectors, you have multiple options. Option 1 is you can try and enable XPath selector or use cypress-testing-library. As I said, I'm gonna make a separate video about doing that in detail. You could just improve the stability. If you are a tester, you could talk to your team and say, hey team, how about we add a custom test identifier to the elements so we can just easily use it in our test automation. And I have an example of that right here, right? You have data test IDs. This is the, you could say, industry standard of how you do the unique attributes. Some teams might have different naming convention. You could have maybe data test or just test ID without the data. It depends, but conceptually it's the same thing. You have a convention that if your element has this attribute, it means that this element is most likely used in your test automation, and it means that if you touch it, you will break your tests. So that's a signal to, let's say, developers who might be not you, who write in the actual code of the app, to be careful when they mess up with the DOM structure. That's pretty much it. I just shown you that CSS selector are not part, and what you can, after you played in your browser and you found the selector, you could literally just copy that and write cypress.get and then .click, something like that, and this code will work. Oh, I have a typo. If you think that I have missed an important CSS selector, please let me know in the comments, and see you next week.